We open with a curious story, a story that's still developing, a real-life hero whose actions have saved lives, and he's risen to political prominence. Now, Congressman Cory Mills is serving the great state of Florida.
But we have to be allowed to ask our leaders the hard questions and demand accountability. That shouldn't be controversial. If it is controversial, maybe the real issue is Congress and the broken system protecting it.
We'll dive into January 6th. The Democrats will have you believe that J6 had dangerous consequences, and it did for Ashli Babbitt, an Air Force veteran who was shot by a Capitol police officer.
It's a terrible story, a tragedy that the mainstream media, the legacy media ignores. We cannot do that. And tonight, our own Joe Hanneman will expose that the fact that Ashli tried to stop, not cause vandalism at the Capitol, and how her family is still fighting now and seems to be looking to close on a wrongful death lawsuit.
And is Jake Tapper the biggest grifter in the business? He has a new book coming out, and apparently he's now finally decided to tell the truth.
Look, this guy, he's making the rounds on the talk show circuit. He claims to be an investigative journalist exposing the truth. Now that he and the media have lost the election, it's easy to tell the truth. So go figure.
We have a spicy show lined up for you tonight. Blaze News, The Mandate, starts right now. Good evening, Patriots. I'm Jill Savage, and joined, as always, by our editor-in-chief, Matthew Peterson.
Tonight, we're going to tell you the story behind the story. Recently, we published 2 articles about a Republican congressman they've made waves in Washington, D.C. But tonight, we're going to take you beyond those headlines.
Yeah, we're talking about Florida Representative Cory Mills. He's a rising star in Republican circles and in right-leaning media, and his background seems worthy of praise.
Yeah, look, this is the guy you might remember. He rescued people from Israel, Afghanistan, and Haiti. Particularly the Afghanistan rescue was notable. He was doing good work in North Carolina after the hurricane. And over the summer, he's the guy who, with others, led a parallel investigation into the Trump assassination, along with Eli Crane and multiple other figures.
Yeah, and he ran on a pro-Christian America First platform. Mills put out a post on X from his rep account on Easter. He said, "He is alive. Today we celebrate our risen Lord. He conquered death and sits at the right hand of the King. Through him, we have the promise of salvation. Happy Easter." He gained the support of Donald Trump. He won Florida's 7th district back in 2022. And in fact, right after the first assassination attempt on President Trump, Mills appeared on Fox, where he slammed the Secret Service.
Keep in mind that I also used to do advanced work when I was with the State Department, as well as for when I was with the agencies. And I've done everything from a advanced counter sniper running teams over in northern Iraq when then Vice President Biden came to meet Masoud Barzani. I've done Overwatch protection for Condoleezza Rice during her operations when she was in Afghanistan as Secretary of State, as well as for foreign dignitaries and other diplomats. And I can tell you, this, in my opinion, looking at it before the investigation, is a massive security failure.
I mean, look, the congressman represents his MAGA. He votes MAGA, and he votes the right way pretty much all the time.
And that all seems pretty good, right? Like, we get a great story. It's out there, and it seems like we found one of the good ones.
Yeah, and maybe he is one of the good ones, but it doesn't bring me any pleasure to say this. The fact of the matter is that many times, really all the time, most times, nothing is as it seems in Washington, D.C.
And I'll say for the audience, I know Cory. I've met him several times. I met him out after the hurricane in North Carolina. That was the first time I met him back in October. There was an event a few weeks later in Dallas that we were both at on election night. We were actually both down there for Donald Trump at his celebration for Florida. And then also Inauguration weekend. It was a big weekend. There were a ton of people out all over at different parties, and I got to see him one more time out there. And I want to be now completely honest with the audience as we go through this story, because this story is going to get interesting. So you want to stick with us. But just to say to you guys, for in full disclosure, because I don't want to hide anything because we don't have anything to hide. I will say that Congressman Cory Mills had asked me out before. I said yes, but we never went on a date. Now, it's not going to be a sob story here because with what we'll be revealing in future days, you'll see that it was actually a blessing in disguise. But I will probably be one of the, it's probably going to be a shorter list if we look at all the conservative women that he hasn't asked out on that. So he seems like a pretty good guy, right? Like at that point, I'm willing to say, yeah, sure, I'll meet up with you for a drink at one night, you know, no big deal.
Yeah, I mean, look, he says all the right things. Seems like a great guy. That's absolutely true. And I'll admit, when I first learned about him, I was, again, full disclosure, I was annoyed because the district that he is, the original district he won when he ran for Congress in 2022, was about to be taken by Anthony Sabatini, who was an acquaintance of mine, a friend of mine, is a Claremont fellow, and he was set to win the race in Florida in Congress. And then all of a sudden, Mills came in and he seemed like he was carpetbagging his way, down to Florida, but these things happen and he had some reason to be in Florida, and he waltzed through Mar-a-Lago and pretty much, became the Trump endorsed candidate. And so I had to tell Anthony, this isn't going to work out. This guy just came in and he's spending his own money in the race. So he's going to get in there and win. And he did.
So now let's fast forward the story because we were in Washington, D.C. back in February. And we were there, actually, when this alleged assault happened, right? I was reading headlines and just trying to figure out what is going on here. So the story went that there was a 27-year-old Iranian-American activist who had called the cops and said there was a domestic disturbance. Now, they both have since said that nothing happened. She retracted her story after the police showed up. But one thing in that was very interesting to me because in the police report, she calls Cory her significant other for over a year. Well, that set something off in my brain because if we go back to North Carolina, we were in the helicopter flying back to get out to go there on the airplane, and nobody is asking the congressman about his personal life the very first day that we met him, right? He just offered information up, though, and I thought this was very interesting. He said, I'm completely single. There's absolutely no one in my life, and I'm very lonely. Which
there's
I thought
multiple people in the helicopter, right?
There's multiple people. Yeah, there's probably
said that out loud.
6 or 7 people on this helicopter, and I'm thinking, okay. And I know that he said this to other people before, so I don't think anything of it until we get to this February incident. And I thought, man, this guy was so adamant that he was single. Now, I'm not a math major here, but I do know that February and October, going backwards, that's not over a year. She had been in his life the whole time. So I thought, man, if he's lying about this, if he claims to be the Christian that he claims to be, that is one very big, bold-faced lie.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the sort of thing where, again, like you all see where this leads. But okay, so he's saying, this kind of stuff, and he's actually not single, but it goes beyond that because this police report comes out because the girlfriend or the woman who says, I've been his significant other for over a year, calls the cops on him, has bruises, says that she is, she's been assaulted. The police report anyway, reports of it say that they can hear him telling her to change her story. She does change her story, and they both agree now, and they both say now, look, nothing really happened. But there were a lot of people in Washington, even on his staff, who were shocked that he was still married, and that kind of came out because of this incident. And, you read these things, you don't know who's right or wrong, but it made waves, and people were saying, what's going on with this guy? What's going on with this thing? There were bruises, were there not? What happened? But a lot of people realized from this, he's still actually negotiating the divorce from his wife. He's still actually married, and he's going around saying he's not. Okay, right? Okay.
Yeah, so I just kept following along with this story. Then, as one would, right, there's people in my life that I know that are now in the news all the time. And so then one of these comments on X got me to start looking even further because somebody said, if you think this is bad, you should go look at the marriage certificate. So I went and looked at the marriage certificate. And Cory Mills is married to Rana Al-Sadi. And okay, that's fine. It's their second marriage, it says, for both of them. And then I thought, well, that's interesting. It says a mom there. No big deal, right? Like, okay, she's from Iraq. That's probably what happened. So then I said, you know what? My brain couldn't let it go. So then I said, let me just Google the imam's name. It's Muhammad al-Hannouti. So I Google the imam's name. This is where we start to get into some really of the interesting stuff, because he's not just an imam, he's actually the mufti of DC, the religious leader, right? He's basically a cardinal of the Catholic Church. Yeah,
he was in 2014 when they got married. So it turns out that the woman he's still married to, going through divorce proceedings, and him get married in this mosque. And you Googled it and found out a little bit about the mosque.
Yeah, so it's not just any ordinary mosque either, right? It's not an ordinary imam, it's not an ordinary mosque. It's actually what we normies would all refer to as the Al-Qaeda mosque. Now, it's Dar al-Hijra Islamic Center in Falls Church, Virginia. And MP, this has a very storied history there.
Yeah, this is a place that has, some of the 9/11 hijackers were there, but the guy who married him is an unindicted co-conspirator in the First World Trade Center bombing, very tied to the Brotherhood, Muslim Brotherhood, and Hamas. This place has been on an FBI watch list for a long time. So, this is very interesting information. Maybe there's an explanation, but the way we got here is because you found this and a few other things and drove over to my house.
Yes, we eventually get an article, which everybody has to go to theblaze.com and read. There are actually 2 articles out about this right now. But yeah, I went over to your house. I said, I found some interesting documents, right? There's enough there that makes this just not an ordinary story. There was something unique about this. There was some reason, like in my brain, I just thought, this isn't adding up to just satisfy whatever thoughts I had in my head, that this is all just well and good.
Yeah, and it was pretty hilarious. I mean, you had already done a bit of research, and just kind of stuck out of the blue. And I'm looking at it thinking, okay, well, this is just weird. There's a lot of questions here that should be answered, because there are serious and bizarre, facts and contradictions, and it was clearly worth asking questions. And let me just tell you something here to everyone at home. I don't like being in a box where I can't ask questions of people on my own side. I don't believe in that. That's not the way I do business. That's not the way that Blaze News is going to do business. So, I kind of saw this like, this is strange. Like, why doesn't anyone ask these questions? Why haven't anyone talked about this in public before? And it fits. I've been thinking this whole year, we need to smash the bubble of conservative media in the way it works, because we need to be transparent and ask legit questions of everyone. And we need to make sure we have the leaders we need in Congress. We don't have a lot of time to save America. So I never have a problem asking questions of Republicans, as if they deserve it. Like we go further and we go farther and deeper. So here's all we did. I said, okay, this is very strange. This congressman got married in 2014 in the Al-Qaeda mosque with a guy who's a radical Muslim. Pretty much everyone in America kind of knew that at the time. Maybe somehow he didn't. Maybe there's, an explanation. But also, he's always represented himself as Christian, at least Catholic or Protestant, depending on the time. And so you're kind of wondering, did you convert? You must have had to convert to Muslims. Are not going to allow a Christian man to convert someone else, to marry a Muslim woman. So this is very strange, right? Obvious questions. So all I did is had a reporter. I said, "Hey, get in touch with his press person and just ask 2 simple questions. That's it. What's your religion? And did this guy marry you? Did this guy officiate your wedding?"
And there was nothing nefarious at this point in time, right? We weren't out to get him. I just found information, and I said, "Well, there's something interesting about this, right? It doesn't add up to the person that he portrays himself to be and the information that is presented. So let's ask questions and get some answers."
Yeah, and you have to read this article. I mean, if they show it on screen here, Representative Cory Mills explains why he's married by a radical Islamic cleric. So all we did is ask those questions. I mean, how is it controversial? What's your religion, and did this guy marry you? A couple days go by, nothing happens. I believe we were both in D.C. We happened to be in D.C. at the time for Blaze. And what happens is he calls up my reporter, Peter Giedel, and in a 50-minute rambling, often heated, belligerent conversation in which he talks about how we must be writing a hit piece, and he threatens to, basically threatens a lawsuit. He says, well, I'm not threatening, but you can call it a threat if you want, if you slander me and blah, blah, blah. How is it slandering someone to ask someone, did this guy marry you and what religion you are? That's the only thing we asked. So when I got a response like that, where someone was threatening my reporter and being very cagey and defensive and belligerent about it, I thought, this is ridiculous. So the next thing I did is I texted him right away as soon as I heard about the call. It's like, hey, we should talk. I didn't, quite say what about, but I said, we should talk. I heard you called my reporter. He didn't get back to me. I think he got back to me the next week. I bugged him again. He got back to me, but he never said a call. So, a week or so went by. He didn't call, and I thought, okay, well, we have enough from him where we need to tell this story. Now, why should you care? Oh, you're going to find out a lot more. We're going to talk about it a lot today, but you're going to find a lot more. Here's the thing. 2014, this guy marries this woman. Okay. He converts to Islam. And okay, you converted to Islam, but why wouldn't you have said that years ago? And why are you still saying you never did? You just did it because you had to help her relatives or whatever, help her go to Iraq. You have to read the story. But here's a reason to care. This guy's on the Foreign Affairs and Armed Services Committee. He shouldn't have been threatened by these two questions. I sure hope he's not threatening other people who would try to write stories about him, because that'd be something we would find out about and start talking about as well ourselves. And the year after he gets married in this radicalized mosque, him and his wife, who's from Iraq, start an international arms company that within a year has a $200 million contract with the nation of Iraq. Well, that's kind of interesting. That's pretty good for a startup, especially a startup from an Iraqi refugee and a guy who was a medic, an ambulance driver in Iraq. And they're both private contractors with the USAID money. So, this is just interesting story, right? And not necessarily something I would publish until you threaten my reporter and you can't answer these obvious questions without getting up in arms. Very strange, Jill.
That is a very brief overview of part one. You can read more about it at theblaze.com. There are currently 2 articles out right now because his girlfriend, Sarah Raviani, tried to say in the Daily Mail after we published our first piece, no, he is Christian. He prays with me and my family. There's no reason for him to lie to us. There's no reason for him to pretend to my family, in which then we replied, because we had spoken to people, one on the record for more in background, who said, no, Cory Mills had told me around 2014 that he had indeed converted to Islam to marry Rana al-Sadi. So the story will continue. Make sure. Go ahead.
There's a picture of his girlfriend there, who just came out as her girlfriend in the Daily Mail article. So think about this. We published this article just saying, okay, this guy, he wanted to respond in this way. Let's respond. Let's print his story about why he converted. He sort of denies that he actually converted to Islam. In the article, we put it out there, and this firestorm erupts, and then all of a sudden, Sarah Raviani, who's the woman who called in the first place, right, the police, and said she had bruises from him, and then retracted. She said, "Hey," to the Daily Mail, not only is the story wrong, like we get along fine,
entirely wrong.
There was no abuse. There's no abuse, but then she says this Blaze News story is entirely untrue. As in nothing in what we printed was true. I've said nothing. Like, these guys have said nothing about what his religion is now. That's why we asked him. We've shown that he presents as Christian, right? But there's this lingering question about what was going on back then. And we printed his story, and she came out and said everything we said in the article was entirely untrue, which also was strange. I mean, she had not been publicly known as his girlfriend. Now she is in a prominent, publication, Loud and Proud, the girlfriend. And also she is saying what Blaze News wrote is entirely untrue. So the only way for you to deal with this, if you're in the audience and curious as to what the hell is going on, is go read our latest article about this, in which, as Jill says, we went back and talked to people, and a lot of them they spoke on background because they were afraid. They were afraid of him retaliating in some way against them. But they said, yes, at the time, and even sometime after of the marriage, he had truly converted to Islam. And one of them is on the record, Max Woodside. He was his unit leader in Iraq for some time. And he said, yeah, Cory, he told me that he converted and became a Muslim. Again, if this was just some random guy, like, who cares? Converts to become a Muslim. When it's a congressman who starts an international arms dealing company who has never publicly addressed this story until we talk to him, and the way he publicly addresses it is by calling us and yelling at my reporter. That's very strange. And we've been pulling on this thread for a little while, and there's going to be a lot more to come.
There are plenty of twists and turns with this story, so make sure to like and subscribe to Blaze News The Mandate, because the story is still developing and we have plenty more to share with you. You don't want to miss it. By the time this show wraps up, another family farm could shut down. No, not from a lack of hard work, but because most of the meat that you get in the grocery store is actually imported. 85% of grass-fed beef in the United States actually comes in from overseas. That's why I get all my meat from GoodRanchers.com, because you know it's 100% American. It's born, raised, and harvested right here, and you actually get to support real family farms. So now more than ever, you need to make the switch to Good Ranchers, because they are tariff-proof. Everything is made in America. Grocery store prices can be unpredictable, but Good Ranchers stays consistent. So right now, when you subscribe, you'll get your choice of free meat for life. You can choose from Wagyu burgers, hot dogs, bacon, or wings in every box. Plus, you'll get an extra $40 off with my code Jill. Now, tariffs, they won't touch them, but this deal is not going to last forever. So visit GoodRanchers.com today. That's GoodRanchers.com, code Jill. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. A now debunked New York Times article reported that Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick was bludgeoned to death on January 6th, setting the tone for the entire Democrat narrative for all of the events to follow. But one person did die. That's Ashli Babbitt, an Air Force veteran who was protesting that day.
That's right. This is a story the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about and has largely ignored, but she did die at the hands of a Capitol Police officer, no less. And her story is far from over.
So here to unpack her family's fight for justice is Blaze News investigative reporter Joe Hanneman. So, Joe, you wrote about Babbitt's death for the family's wrongful death lawsuit for theblaze.com. So let's start with the big picture. Let's go back to who Ashli Babbitt is and remind our audience about this story.
Sure. Ashli Babbitt came to D.C. like, tens of thousands of others or hundreds of thousands of others to hear the president speak, and had concerns about the election, but also she had really become quite a fan of President Trump. She's often portrayed as some sort of QAnon nut, but the truth is she once voted for Barack Obama. So this was not somebody who was an ideologue. But she did like President Trump and came to the ellipse to hear his speech. She and her husband ran a pool cleaning company in San Diego. And so he stayed home while she went out to D.C. by herself to hear the speech. Ashli is a 14-year Air Force veteran. She was a military policewoman. She also was in the Air National Guard in the same role. So she had a lot of experience in dealing with crowd control, dealing with unruly people. She guarded terrorists in the Middle East as part of her duties. So she did come into the Capitol about 2:23 p.m. that day and just kind of flowed with the crowd. There were thousands of people in the building at one point. And then she ended up in the hallway right outside the speaker's lobby of the House. And that's when all of the trouble started.
Yeah, and go into that. I mean, because this is a story that I feel like a lot of our audience knows about, but even then, it's just not talked about enough. It's not allowed. The story isn't allowed to be told in mainstream media, other than that it was justified that she was shot that day.
Right, and so many untruths have been told about her. You'll see her referred to in mainstream media as a rioter. Well, the truth is she wasn't a rioter. Not in any sense. She did not do any rioting. She didn't vandalize anything. She didn't assault anyone. She didn't try kicking in doors like some of the people that were surrounding her in that hallway. So she was the first one to enter. She came in with an independent journalist named Taylor Hanson. They walked in very informal, light as a breeze, and started chatting with these three police officers who were guarding the door. But within seconds, a large group filled in behind them, and it got very loud. And then a provocateur named Zachary Alam stepped to the center and just started to create chaos. Yelling and screaming, saying he was going to F up the police. And then he turned around and started punching the glass with his fist, very close to the heads of the Capitol police officers. So he was taunting them. And Ashli tried to deal with him. She tried to get his attention. She put his hand on him at one point, and he brushed her away. And so she went over to the side while he continued to escalate everything. And then this went on, it seemed like a lot longer, but it went on for about 5 minutes. And when he finally took out the far right side light window with a riot helmet, like a giant hammer in his hand, when he smashed that out, that's when Ashli grabbed him by the backpack, spun him around, and gave him a left hook to his nose and knocked off his glasses. And then almost immediately, she went up into the window and was shot by Lieutenant Byrd. And Zachary probably was going to go up in that window, and he would have been shot most likely if she had not done that. So she really put an end to the rioting, although she tried to stop it while it was going on. She told the police, you've got to call for help. She told them to call for backup. So she was an anti-rioter, and yet she gets so much vitriol as being part of a mob, but she really was not.
So, Joe, let's bring it back then to present day and the family's wrongful death lawsuit. What's the latest there? What's going on?
Well, they have reached, as you'd say, a tentative agreement or an agreement in principle, a settlement agreement in principle that was announced about 10 days, 2 weeks ago in federal court. We don't know any of the details, but I think that negotiations have probably been going on for quite a while. Once President Trump was sworn back into office, he's taken a very particular interest in her case, and I suspect behind the scenes has pushed the Department of Justice to come up with some sort of a negotiated settlement. So right now they're waiting for Aaron Babbitt and his attorneys to react to the latest draft that was sent to them by Department of Justice. And then they have to file an update with the court. But we've had a couple of hearings in May that were absolute circus. The judge really has a thing for the Judicial Watch attorneys, and she was shouting at him in 2 hearings in a row in May. You'd almost describe it as a scream. It wasn't quite that loud, but it was very loud. And she thought that he was talking over her, disrespecting her. But whenever they have these dial-in meetings and some people are testifying or speaking remotely through Zoom or some other platform, there's often a lag, and you could hear it, but he tried to tell her there's a delay, but she would have nothing of it. And so she really got after him.
It's unbelievable. I mean, so she just shows this antagonism in the courtroom towards them. I mean, what do you make of what's the reason here? Have they done something to provoke her, or what do you think is causing this?
Well, I think they're probably dealing with what the defendants, the J6ers, have dealt with the DC courts, is some very deep bias. And in fact, in the first hearing that they had before this judge, Judge Reyes, back in August, the Robert Stick, the Judicial Watch attorney, brought up the issue of bias. And he actually pointed right at her, said that they had a transcript where she was describing January 6th as an insurrection. And another judge had opined in public on the record that there's just no way anyone would convince him that this wasn't a justified shooting. So they brought that up. And one of the reasons they wanted to change the venue of this lawsuit back to San Diego. And that has been going on, fighting about that for probably about 4 months now. But I went back and looked at the transcripts from all the hearings that have taken place in D.C. on this case. And she got after the same attorney on the very first hearing and threatening him with contempt of court because he wasn't answering a question that she wanted a particular answer, I think. And she wasn't getting it. So she threatened him with contempt. And it made it pretty dicey for them. It's walking on eggshells, not knowing what's going to set the judge off.
So let's go back to Ashli Babbitt and that day, the story you just told. There is a character known as Helmet Boy, who we were just talking about. We didn't use the words Helmet Boy, but this is someone who is breaking. This is the guy breaking that glass right just before she is shot. And you told this story about how she stood up to him in this article, which was very interesting. But he's also now in more trouble himself.
Yeah, Zachary Alam is, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison for his January 6 charges. He was convicted, or he was found guilty by a jury on 10 charges. He ended up being sentenced only on 9 because the Supreme Court tossed out the obstruction of an official proceeding charge, as that the DOJ had used that in an unconstitutional manner. But he created the chaos, and he is at least partially responsible for what took place because he was an agent provocateur. And, he was pardoned by President Trump, and his after he got out, I understand he'd been staying in a shelter that's run by some J6 pardonees, but he was arrested on a felony burglary charge in Virginia last week. It was a residential burglary where the police said he walked into someone's home late at night. The house was dark, and was confronted by the son. The mother and son were home, and then the police arrested him. So he's facing 2 charges, 1 felony and 1 misdemeanor for burglary. And he's got quite a criminal record outside of the J6 stuff. This is a very troubled man.
Joe, you and Steve Baker do great work, obviously, on this January 6th. It's still going on. I can't believe that we still have so many stories that are still left untold. So what do you guys have coming up in the works?
Well, we're still, after 4+ years, trying to figure out what happened that day and how it happened and why it happened. We know there were provocateurs in the crowd. Exactly where they all came from is something we're still looking into. And there were individuals that incited some of the worst violence. And if you really drill down, there were maybe 60 defendants, J6ers as you would call them, who got violent that day. So it was actually a fairly small number, but these flare-ups that happened oftentimes just spun out of control. And the police were very heavy-handed with their use of chemicals and with crowd control weapons, flashbangs and other types of devices that it was like whapping a hornet's nest. It was not the approach to use to try to break up that big of a crowd. So we are looking at a number of things that gets into who might have ordered some people to go there and cause trouble. And I think we're going to end up finding. People like to laugh at this kind of stuff and call it a conspiracy, but I think there were a lot of conspiracies that were carried out that day, and we're still trying to figure that out. Because Ashli Babbitt's situation in that hallway, there are at least 22 of those men who have not been identified, publicly anyway, were never charged, were never arrested, and we're still trying to figure out who they are, including some that were acting very suspiciously. So, we were hoping that this lawsuit would get us some of those answers. I'm not sure if it will now, if they're going to settle, but we're just really getting started. And with President Trump in office, we're hopeful that we'll get better access to information because the original January 6th Select Committee destroyed evidence and really buried a lot of its information. So it's kind of going for Congress going back and recreating the wheel.
Well, it's a privilege to have you aboard, and this is one of the most important things to me when I took over as editor-in-chief. Blaze Media will not stop looking into this story because it's critical that we get to the truth, as you very well know, and we appreciate your work.
Yeah, go look at theblaze.com. Joe Hanneman has great work up there, and we're looking forward to everything that you still have yet to unveil. Thanks so much for your time, Joe.
Yep, thank you.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more right after this. Well, we know conservatives are winning. We love all of the winning, and we know the momentum, it's shifting. You can feel it in the air, but we know that we still have a long ways to go, and that's why Blaze TV exists. We need to keep pushing. We have all the bold voices, the great reporting by Joe Hanneman and others. We have the stories that obviously the corporate media, they're not going to be touching this. So when you subscribe, you're not just watching Blaze TV, you're standing with a movement. And right now, it's just $8 a month when you use the code BNT at checkout. So go to blazetv.com/BNT, use the promo code BNT, and save $20 off an annual plan. Let's keep winning together. Blaze TV, unfiltered, unafraid, on demand.
The bottom line is the White House was lying, not only to the press, not only to the public, but they were lying to members of their own cabinet. They were lying to White House staffers. They were lying to Democratic members of Congress, to donors about how bad things had gotten. And in fact, Alex and I started writing this book after the election of 2024, and we spoke with more than 200 people, most of whom, almost all of whom, were Democrats, and almost all of whom wouldn't be honest with us or wouldn't be candid with us until after the election. And then after the election, we found out all of these things that when you looked at what was going on with President Biden at the time, it probably doesn't surprise you the extent to which he was deteriorating. But now we have anecdotes and facts about what was really going on behind the scenes with details that Democrats wouldn't share with us until after Election Day.
Is Jake Tapper the king of grift? It's a new book he's trying to sell. Suddenly now he's exposing the truth now that he and the mainstream media lost the election. How convenient. The Biden book war is officially underway, and it's not exactly flattering. So let's bring in senior politics editor Chris Bedford with more, because you wrote about this in your Beltway brief. So Chris, walk us through how we suddenly found that Joe Biden is in rough shape during his presidency when it was very obvious to you and I before.
It's just incredible. I mean, this is awesome. Every one of these anecdotes that he discovered, you can really go through them one by one. And one of them actually stands out as pretty interesting. I'd not heard this, that the administration was considering the use of a wheelchair as soon as the second administration of Joe Biden started, the second term of Joe Biden started, but not before. They didn't want to be caught by the press doing this before. So Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson from Axios, they covered Joe Biden. They covered him for years. Alex was on the campaign at the time. He wrote a lot of stuff about the campaign. Some of it was critical. But he never at any point wrote about the obvious cognitive decline of the president of the United States, ever. Jake Tapper covered, of course, politics from his role as a host at CNN. Never once talked about the obvious cognitive decline of the president of the United States of America. In fact, a few years earlier is a clip that's circulating of him berating Lara Trump, saying, "How dare you suggest this? You know, how do you even look at children who have stutters? How do you think this is going to make them feel when you when you go after Joe Biden?" I kind of want to use that sometime. If I ever am in some kind of back and forth with Jake Tapper, what are you going to say to children with stutters when you have this criticism? It's just a psychotic thing to say. So they have examples in this book of the president forgetting close aides' names. Okay. I've got press conferences where he couldn't remember his Secretary of Defense's name. I've got award ceremonies where he couldn't remember the person's name. He turned to his left and his right at almost every speech and couldn't remember the person's name. They said that he had an awkward gait and he was to have his spinal deterioration made it difficult to walk. Therefore, aides would surround him, as if we couldn't see past this. It was extremely clear that he did the dead man shuffle when he came out on stage. He took the kiddie stairs at the back of Air Force One after multiple falls. This is not an inside scoop. He was literally talking to dead people sometimes in the room. He was yelling out to people who had passed away at memorials for them. And it wasn't just that, which fine, you can forgive someone. They've got an extremely busy schedule. They're walking in and they're looking for a friend. It's, oh, you actually at the memorial. The president's schedule is very busy. I get it. He was referencing recent conversations with long dead people. I was talking to this guy when I was in France, talking to Jacques Chirac in France. I don't think, maybe, I mean, you were, maybe 20 years ago, but you definitely weren't now. And anyone who covered Joe Biden in 2016, 2012, by the time it was 2020 in the campaign trail, if you didn't see an obvious decline, you were lying to yourself. He also had stories about congressmen saying, listen, I'd seen these signs before in relatives who were suffering from Alzheimer's, dementia, or other kind of frailties. It's a reality of life that all of us, if we're fortunate enough, have loved ones who are aging around us and who we have to go through that painful struggle with. So we recognize it. Almost all Americans can recognize this. The thing is, we were talking about this at the time because it was recognizable in public. None of this stuff was hidden. You don't need to go to White House aides now trying to clear their name and say they weren't actually responsible for this, or for the press to say we weren't actually responsible for this. Not only was it obvious, but they papered it up, they covered it up, and they smeared and attacked everyone who pointed out that it was obvious. This is one of my favorites. I, too, have fallen off my bike while stationary, but I was hammered.
Well, that's a good excuse. Let's 60 seconds we have left. I do have to ask, how do you think this thing is going to sell? It's an odd thing to me because it's hard to think about who the market really is for this book.
It might be a loss leader. Publishers go with that fairly often. They'll pay a big settlement out to something that gets their name. Penguin Press, I think, is this one. In the media, it gets them in the newspapers. It's a glamour title. It's like when you see Barack Obama make a $20 million book deal. They're not selling $20 million in books. I mean, maybe to the Barack Obama Library or to the different foundations. By the way, remember back in the day when Obama used to get like the Lincoln Memorial to buy his book, put it in there when he was president of the United States? That is just a great level of grift. So I'd have to see the exact contract of how much they made, for whether or not they're going to break even. It could be interesting to have this stuff documented, but what I'm really looking forward to is what comes next. Because when you smear people who are close to Biden, well, they start to talk. And when they start to talk and they start to smear people, other people start to talk. And you see this pirate ship that's going down, and as opposed to getting in the life rafts, everyone's at each other's throat. It's fairly common when you see a losing campaign on this magnitude. And what comes next is going to be exciting.
Yeah, that's when all of the fun starts, and you're going to be right in the middle of it there in Washington, D.C. Bedford, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, don't go anywhere. We will be back to wrap up the show right after this. The White House has shut down online rumors that Trump will pardon former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin for the death of George Floyd. However, the possibility did generate a ton of discourse on X. So actually, MP tweeted out the question today for everybody. Do you think that Derek Chauvin should be pardoned? And the results are in. 84% of our audience, MP, thinks that he should be pardoned. They are very, very sure that he should be pardoned.
Yeah, I don't think that fits with the majority of congressional staffers on the GOP. I think it'd be a little less, but our audience is different.
Well, Black Lives Matter, they did just finally remove that from the streets in Washington, D.C. Things are changing. We might have a new tune out there at some point in time.
Things are changing? Really? Is everything changing all the time now? I don't know.
Things are changing. It's good because we see the stories on January 6th and everything now. It's coming to light. We're seeing the truth be revealed in a lot of different areas right now. And that's a good thing. We need to shine light on things.
Yeah, look, this is near and dear to all of our hearts at Blaze, and you see it in the themes of this show. Everyone in media is in uncharted territory right now. No one knows anything when everything happens all the time. No one knows anything when the business models are all failing. So the best thing to do is just to be transparent as hell and to start poking around and doing your job. And to me, the job is taking up stories that no one else would take up, like Ashli Babbitt, like Joe Hanneman's work, Steve Baker's work on January 6th. These are still riveting stories. They're complicated. There's good and bad on all sides. The fact that Ashli Babbitt is beating down someone she's stopping someone from committing vandalism before she is killed. What happened in that murder, that you could argue that the standard operating procedure would be, as Michael Byrd did, that he was supposed to shoot her. She's dead now, and her family is grieving, and they have a wrongful death suit that's actually getting traction. Like, these are interesting stories, but no one else is going to tell them. So we are, and we're not going to let justice slide. We're not going to let the search for truth slide. So I don't care about anything else. Like, we will stick on January 6th, and Hanneman is doing a great job on that. And look, he's great too, because he's an adult. He's a guy with a lot of experience. He did some great work at Epic Times. He was scripting some of the J6 documentaries there. He and Baker really care about this. And then when you think about Congressman Cory Mills, which we had some fun with in the beginning of the show, this is one of those things where I just want people to kind of see how we come to the conclusions and the journey that everyone in investigative is on. And also, you need to start seeing what no one else will tell you, which is who is really who in the world of the people that you're supposed to admire and revere in MAGA Maha world. If we want that movement to be successful and strong, we have to start being honest about who people are and what they're up to, because we get the leaders that we allow. And we need to make sure that we have leaders now who can actually do the job, because we don't have a lot of time left here.
I will say investigative journalism is one of the best things that Blaze News does. You see Joe Hanneman, you see Steve Baker. I didn't know that my life would be intertwined into investigative journalism. I'm trying not to put myself in this story. It's not about me, but I did want to just be right up front with all the audience today.
Yeah, and look, the story is way more interesting that way, and the story is just interesting in itself. I mean, what you're going to find with that one is, there's all kinds of sex stuff, there's all kinds of money stuff, and it's just these are questions that are worth asking and exploring and looking at. And I'm telling you, you pull threads on that, and it gets very interesting very quick. And at the end of the day, the truth is always stranger than fiction. It's never neat and clean. It's always complicated in an interesting way if you pick the right ones. And that's it. Of course, one moral of the story seems to be careful of getting on a helicopter with Jill.
That is one way of looking at it. I look at it and just say, we have the right to know who our elected officials are. And if asking a few questions is going to get us in trouble, well, I don't think that should get us in trouble if it's just pretty simple questions. And we're going to continue doing that here. And as Peterson said, the story will continue to get a lot more interesting. So make sure that you like and subscribe and download and share it with your friends, because this journey, it's going to be going on for a little while longer, Peterson. Oh yeah, there's a few investigative channels now that we've opened up here at Blaze. Past we're going down. Bringing Mike Howell from the Oversight Project on as a contributor. He's got all kinds of interesting stuff going on that has real impact right away. And that's the thing. You want to be navigating actually in the game with impact, talking about things that matter. He's doing great work. Baker is they're not done with the directed energy weapon story. That is crazy. There's more to come on that. So we've just started here at Blaze News, The Mandate. We'll bring the news to you. You can decide what you want to make of all of it. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you back here tomorrow.